Hello there, welcome to From the North, a podcast made here in the North about issues that affect us here in the North. Now today we are discussing a pretty tough issue, it's fair to say. It's suicide, which according to campaigners, it's reached crisis point here. I've got three great guests with me. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves. I think that's much better. We're going to start with Stephen. Stephen, tell me who you are and what you do.
Sure, I'm Stephen. I'm a listening volunteer at the Stockport branch of Samaritans, which is a charity designed to support people in distress, and particularly with people who have suicidal concerns.
And next to you we have Nav. Nav?
I'm a doctor, I'm a psychiatrist. These days I'm Professor of Psychiatry at the University of Manchester, and I spend my time researching the causes, prevention and treatment of suicide.
And then we have Michael.
I'm Michael Josephson. On the 28th of December 1998, I was in a very, very dark place and I attempted suicide and jumped over 60 foot off a bridge onto a dual carriageway.
OK, well, it would seem you're probably the best person to start with, I think, in this chat, Michael. So how on earth did you get to a place like that, do you think?
I'd had a traumatic childhood. My mother died when I was very, very young. I suffered abuse and bullying, horrific abuse. I was brought up in the care system. I had no family, no childhood memories. I became a heavy drinker, a party animal. I hid from all my problems. I partied by night, worked by day.
When you say you hid from them, what do you mean? What do you mean you hid from them?
I drank and took substances to block all my childhood memories, or all of what had happened to me away. I didn't want to ever discuss it. I didn't want to face up to it. I didn't want to discuss it with other people. I was probably more embarrassed about it. So the way I dealt with it was drinking and partying and going out. And
so did your friends know you as Michael the party guy, Mike was the party animal? You know, if we want to get some stuff, he's the guy. If we want to have a good time, he's the guy.
I was just the one that never wanted to go home and wanted to go out every night of the week.
Right.
But at the back of that, I still wanted to work and I still wanted to earn a living. So, you know, I was still hungry and ambitious, but I was hiding away from all my problems and my past. And December 1998 was a very, very low place.
So how did you go from, you were going out and partying, you knew you were hiding away from stuff that was bad. How did you go from it being quite a bad day, quite a few bad days, to being a really bad day where you thought, right, that's it, I'm done?
I'd say the months living up to it, everything was catching up with me. The come downs were making me depressed. The alcohol was making me tired. It was making me snappy. It was making me upset. I was lonely. I wasn't in a relationship. I was coming to terms with my sexuality, which was another big confusion for me and horrific to accept. And I just went. I had an awful Christmas was a sad time for me anyway, because I never had family. And when my mother first got ill before she died, it was around the Christmas time. So Christmas is always a bad time for me anyway. Now I've made it into a happy right. Annual event, but then it was very, very low for me, and I went out, I drank, I took substances, and I actually went home to my apartment. I had friends in my living room drinking, and I left the house. I sneaked out of the house, walked up the road and went to the bridge where I tried to take my life.
Nav, you were nodding away there when Michael was talking about some of the things that got him to that place. I mean, I'm guessing this sounds not stereotypical, but very obvious to you. You hear this a lot.
I mean, I think it's really important to say that no two people are alike, no two people's stories are alike. But, you know, what we've just heard is really powerful. And some of the themes are themes that I hear about quite often, you know, bad things happening in childhood, a difficult, you know, early period in people's life that can increase risk later on, alcohol, drugs, and then, you know, often it's this slow build up over months or years, and then, you know, one final thing or one final, sometimes we talk about, you know, a final event that really kind of sets people down
some
that
sort
road.
Of trigger or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. So yes, you know, it's really important, and you know, the other thing is, of course, we know that men are at higher risk than women as well.
Right. Yeah. Why? for those who don't know, why is it that men are more likely and at more of a risk than women? Why is that?
I mean, it's a striking finding. Men are 3 times more likely to take their lives than women. And
Well, that's ridiculous.
Well,
Why?
Well, partly we think it's because of the methods of suicide men choose when they choose to hurt themselves. They tend to use more dangerous methods. But partly it's to do with help seeking. So as a middle-aged man myself, if I'm psychologically or physically unwell, do I go and see the doctor? Do I seek help? I'm much less likely to do it. So that has to be a really important part of the story. And the other thing we've already heard about is, as men, we do things that worsen our mental health, make us at higher risk of hurting ourselves.
Right.
Drink, drugs, that kind of thing.
Okay. Stephen,
Yes.
you are at the Samaritans.
That's right.
You pick up the phone when people, maybe sometimes like Michael,
Absolutely.
say, I'm done, I'm over. What goes through your mind firstly when you hear something like this and they're on the phone and they sound at their last tether?
Yeah, well, I think maybe just as a starting point about Samaritans, I mean, we have quite extensive training.
Right.
So it's about a 9-month period of training, and part of that is listening in to phone calls. So when you actually take your first call, you're used to hearing some of the stories and the types of issues that you're going to hear on the phones. So our role is very much a listening role. So actually we're not there to resolve problems for the callers. We're there to listen in a serious, empathetic, positive way. And that's something that often people, I don't know about Michael's situation, but often people don't have. They don't have someone that they can talk to about an issue, and if the phone calls may be 20 minutes long, my longest call is 4.5 hours, so it depends on the situation. So it's very rare, it's difficult to actually find someone who's going to sit and listen in a kind of conscientious, positive, empathetic way.
When people
for a long
ring
period
up,
of time.
when they ring up, sorry to interrupt you,
That's fine.
when they ring up, what sort of things do they say? And when do you suddenly go, right, this guy, this lady, she's right at the edge? What do they say? How do you know?
I mean, the range of calls is enormously variable. So it ranges from people who are very lonely, people who've got immediate grief situations, people who've had long-term mental health problems, so people with 30 years of depression or schizophrenia or anxiety or whatever. So there's a whole range of different types of callers. And one of the things we always do and make a point of doing is to ask them about suicide. Because again, it is a question, you mentioned it when you started the session here, it's a bit of a taboo subject. Traditionally it's been a legal thing, it's not illegal anymore, and there's obviously moral and religious issues around taking your own life. So we make a point as an organisation of always asking the question, has it ever got to the point where, for example, you feel like ending your life, etc. So we'll often ask that question quite early on, and people are a little bit shocked by that, but what we're doing is we're allowing the caller to talk about something which may be a big problem for them. If they aren't suicidal, great, and we'll just move on from that and talk about whatever the issue is, etc. So they're all very different, but it's about trying to understand where the caller's coming from and just being there to support. We're not there to give the answer because we don't know the answer. We don't believe we have enough knowledge.
Right.
I'm sure you don't in your role many times. It's coming from the caller. It's up to the caller, as in Michael's case. He felt he needed to work out a solution for himself.
Yeah.
So our role is very much to support, listen empathetically, and try to give them an opportunity and space to talk about whatever issue it is that they have.
Nav said, Michael, that that men of a certain age, they don't want to talk about it. You said you didn't want to talk about
I
it.
knew
Could you have talked maybe to Stephen? You couldn't have talked to him, even though he's as calm as he's like
I was
a
in my
pond, that
early
man.
20s, and at that time I didn't want to ring somebody. I felt embarrassed to ring somebody up and tell them my problems, or to tell. I was depressed.
Why didn't you think you couldn't tell them? Because you had friends, you had family. Some family, I'm guessing, or
no family.
Close friends. Could you have not told a close friend? Maybe
Nobody knew my past. Nobody knew what had happened to me, and I was embarrassed of my past, and I didn't want to tell anybody about that. And I didn't want to ring up a stranger and talk to them.
That's very common, actually, Michael.
I was
very common.
I was in denial. I was embarrassed.
Lots of people struggle with it.
I thought, how is somebody at the end of the telephone going to know how I feel?
Right.
So I have to deal with this myself.
You have to deal with it yourself.
That's why I went on to do what I did.
Now, fortunately, it didn't succeed. You survived. But when you were lying in that hospital bed and you had a lot of injuries, when did you suddenly think to yourself, hold on a minute, that was a stupid thing? Or when did you start to feel, I can get past this, I can move on?
Lying there, being told you're probably never ever going to walk again, covered, to date I've had 27 procedures and operations, and I will have more to come in the future. Thinking that you're never going to walk again, first of all, made me go into an even deeper depression, thinking, I've done this, now I could be in a wheelchair and never walk. But as time went by, I think I self-healed myself, because as I started opening up to people, I'm lying in bed 24 hours a day. I made friends with nurses, I spoke to doctors, I told them bits and bobs, not all of my story, but why I did what I did, and with feedback, and they're saying, why didn't you ever speak to anybody? There's always help out there. I never knew that.
No.
I'd heard of the Samaritans, but there was other things that I could have done. I could have been bold, I could have been ring the Samaritans. I didn't want to do that, but looking back on that, I made a mistake. I'm very lucky to be here alive today, but had I reached out and spoke to people, I probably wouldn't have let myself get as low as I did that day.
Yeah.
Maybe if I'd have spoke to people on the day when I was on the bridge, I think it would have been too late. It wouldn't have stopped me, because I'd got to that point. But I think if you're feeling like that, or you do feel very, very depressed or suicidal before it gets to the critical point where I got to, had I reached out for help, I wouldn't have got as low. I don't think I could have come back from what I got to, but had I reached out for help before I got there, then that would have helped me, and I wouldn't have done what I did.
Now, how do we get this message across to men and women, obviously, to speak to somebody and reach out?
I think that's really powerful what you've said, because what I've heard is, yeah, I was in a desperate place at that moment. I, couldn't really see a way out, but what you've just shown us is that recovery is possible. So, one of the things for people watching this who are feeling, really desperate at their lowest point, is that sometimes it feels like it's going to go on forever, but it's a temporary state of affairs, and those of us around them have to help them during that critical period, and then months, years later, you're sitting here. It's
I've taken
incredible.
my badness and gone on to help others. I've taken all my negativity now. I do a lot of charity fundraising for children and the elderly.
Do you see the signs, Michael? When you get up in the morning, it's going to be not such a good day. Not obviously as terrible as it was that day, but can you see the signs now and you go, it's going to be one of those days today, and you take that on board?
I take that on board.
Yeah.
Before I used to just push it all to one side and leave it, and it was building and building and building, and it got to a point where I couldn't push it away anymore, and I just couldn't. What did I do? I drank, I took drugs, or I was taking tablets from doctors from depression, but it was a vicious circle. It was making me worse and worse and worse.
Okay.
And I would never want anybody to get into that position.
Okay.
But I'm really interested, because one of the big things that we're grappling with nationally, actually internationally, across the world, is how we get men who are at risk to, you use the word open up or seek help. And, things we've been talking about kind of nationally are trying to reach men through sport, but actually trying to talk about it, try and destigmatise suicide a little bit.
Right.
And I don't know what you think about that. Is that going to work?
Yeah, possibly it could. I mean, there's a huge. It's a masculine thing, Men don't want to speak to people. Men don't want to speak to other people. And then there is the thought when I did consider speaking to people. I thought, people think I'm attention seeking. People say just grow up. I didn't think people would understand that I was that low and I needed help.
Stephen, when people ring, do you hear this type of thing? I don't know why I'm calling you. I don't really need to. Do people say things like, I didn't really need to call you. They
would rarely say that. They would often say, as Michael said, I don't know how to start the conversation.
Oh, right.
I'm not sure if I can handle this call. And we do also have an email service which we use, and face-to-face contacts if people feel more comfortable with that. But the reality is, I don't know what it is, but maybe 80% of our contacts are over the phone, and we have something like 5.7 million calls a year, believe it or not. So once every 6 seconds someone contacts Samaritans,
Have
so it's
you
a very
definitely stopped somebody? Do you think, as far as you can tell, have you definitely probably stopped a number of people from doing?
I would be surprised if I haven't, but you never know. And again, that's a big part of it. It's an extremely confidential service, so it stays within Samaritans. It doesn't go outside Samaritans, and our callers really value that. So it's not a situation, unlike in your situation, where you're seeing a patient and there's a kind of follow-up, and you have a duty of care, etc., etc. Our role is to be there in the moment, whether it's 3 o'clock in the morning or 10 in the afternoon or whatever, because we're a 24/7 service, to be there for that person at that point in time and try to support them. So if you'd contacted us, Michael, at that time, there would have been someone there dedicated to you to try to support you, not to resolve all your problems. We don't know you, we don't have the answers. It's not about that. It's that feeling that there is someone out there ready to talk to you, you know. So often people will call and say, I don't know how to start the call. And again, we're obviously trained to try to encourage people to talk. But also we say, well, if now's not the time, then, you know, you can email us or call us later whenever you like, or we can do a follow-up call. So we do follow-up call people who are, particularly if they are suicidal or something like that.
Okay, guys, we're almost approaching kind of near our time. This is all brilliant stuff that you're telling me. I'm going to ask both of you, Michael and Nav, this one. I'll start with you, Nav. Signs to look out for people. You know, it's your uncle, it's your sister, it's your brother, it's your friend, it's your best mate. What should you be looking out for if you think that maybe your friend is going down a road that they shouldn't be going down?
Signs of, you know, people being low, not doing things that they
because what's the difference though between just a bad day or a really bad day? How can you,
well,
you know what I mean?
Partly it's about kind of severity, partly it's about how low people are, but partly it's about, you know, duration, so how long it's been going on for. But, you know, there's no harm in asking how people are and asking the questions. So, you know, that's one thing, people not doing the things they used to enjoy, people drinking or taking substances more than they were. You know, it's worth asking the question, you know, are you all right? And if people aren't all right, being prepared to say, well, you know, get help from your doctor. You know, there's Samaritans, there's lots of other organisations that do really excellent work in this area, but it's about asking the question and not being afraid to ask it, really.
Okay, Michael, what would you say? What should people look out for? What were the signs for?
I wasn't eating, I was drinking a lot, I was taking substances, I wasn't sleeping, I was very, very tired, I was very, very ratty.
But how do you approach it? Because as you say, you wouldn't have spoken about it. So
no, I wouldn't have spoken about it.
So how do you get somebody to talk about it then?
Maybe if somebody would have come to me and said, "Are you okay, Michael? You're not yourself," I would have reached out.
Yeah.
Looking back now, and look, anybody else out there who gets in that place where I was, you know, you mustn't bottle your feelings up. You must reach out and speak to somebody. And the stigma around Samaritans and things like that, you know, that's 40 years ago. We're in 2019 now. It's modern days. It's acceptable to reach.
It's all right to talk about it.
It's all right to talk about suicide. You know,
yeah.
20 years ago when I did it, I don't think people spoke about things.
But the numbers are still, guys. The numbers, you know, Nav. The numbers are still going up. They're not getting not going that much lower. Yeah. So maybe meant they're still not getting that much, even though it's 2019, as you say, Michael.
They are a bit lower than they used to be, but there are still around 6,000 suicide deaths per year in this country, and it's too many. And, you know, the question is what more we can do. I think we can engage men. I think we need to...
The whole stigma, I think, of being about male and macho not wanting to speak out. Put all that to one side.
Yeah.
If you're in a low place, reach out and ask for help.
Open your mouth and ask somebody, yeah.
And we can also do things about when people do hurt themselves, when people do self-harm, young people self-harm, older people self-harm. You know, that is a real signal. It's an opportunity to intervene, because we know people who hurt themselves, have injured themselves, are at greater risk of eventual suicide. So a real opportunity to intervene there. And then, you know, the other thing is just making sure services are around for everyone, you know, for mental illness, in primary care by your GP, but also psychiatric services, mental health services. So covering all those bases.
Okay. Guys, I'm really going to have to stop you there because we have run out of time. Michael, Nav and also Stephen, thank you all very much indeed.
My pleasure.
That's it. Guys, if you've been affected by anything that we've discussed, the contact details for several helplines are in the description. They're free to call and they are completely confidential. Thanks very much for joining us. Goodbye.